Hi, I'm Chris Buskirk, chairperson of the Conference Evangelism Task Force, and it's my pleasure to be here today with Jodi Cataldo. She is the Director of Laity and Leadership for Discipleship Ministries, and we'd like to talk just a little bit about an approach to evangelism and really all of discipleship called H.O.P.E, that she is making available to churches. Jodi, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay.
What is the
What is
H.O.P.E?
H.O.P.E?
Yes.
H.O.P.E is what we have to offer the world through Jesus Christ, but it's also an acronym that we use for a discipleship process or system. It's not a program, it's actually a system. And the acronym represents H being hospitality, O is for offer Christ, P is for purpose, and E is for engagement. And I think it's an easy way to remember what we should be about in our local churches as we're developing disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see evangelism happening in that process?
Well, very much in the first part. If we look at the discipleship processes outlined, the core process of discipleship in the Book of Discipline in paragraph 122, the first one is proclaim. Mm-hmm. And then that falls under our H of hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're going out, you're proclaiming the word. You are creating a sense of belonging. You're developing relationships with new people outside the church as well as anybody that might happen to come inside the church.
Mm-hmm. And then what happens in the O step?
In the O step, that's offer Christ. That's where you want to help provide opportunities for people to be able to make a commitment to Christ.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that offering that decision, I guess, even in the O part, is part of the evangelism process. It's holistic.
Mm-hmm.
And
very
then
holistic.
What happens as you transition from O to P?
Then when you move into P, is purpose is really creating a sense of purpose of who you are as a believer in Jesus Christ. You're deepening people's faith through the practice of the means of grace. You're equipping people, you're empowering people, connecting their gifts with ministry so that then they can be sent out, which is the E of H.O.P.E, which is engagement. So then when they're then engaged and going outside the church walls and engaging once again in the community and building new relationships, and they're starting to practice H all over again. So it's actually a cycle. And different people will plug in different points of that cycle depending on where they are in their journey of discipleship. But the idea is that we reach new people, we offer them an opportunity to make a commitment to Christ, we build them up in the faith, and then we send them out.
Right. Well, what makes you especially excited about this approach to discipleship and evangelism? Is there something that stands out to you as kind of a step forward for how we do evangelism and discipleship?
Yes, because it's really about reclaiming our Wesleyan roots. I was so excited when I read about what Wesley was doing during the Wesleyan movement, and what he did with class meetings and the bands and societies lines up perfectly with this H.O.P.E cycle. And what we see in those days with the class meetings is that the church grew phenomenally. Absolutely grew phenomenally. And I see that same thing happening in Acts 2 during the Pentecostal time. When the church grew by daily. The numbers grew daily. And I haven't seen that since. And so I thought, wow, what if we could really go back and reclaim these roots and this movement through discipleship processes? The results can have like a tsunami effect.
Right.
And it's so exciting to me because I think we've kind of forgotten a little bit what those roots really meant to us as a church, and we've become content to sit in pews too often rather than really intentionally looking at a discipleship process and what we're about as a church and being the church in the world today.
Jodi, when it comes to actually using H.O.P.E and the fruit that comes from using it, are you aware of churches that are having success using the H.O.P.E process?
Yes, I think there's a church in Western Pennsylvania that I've had the opportunity to coach through the H.O.P.E process in Monongahela, Pennsylvania. And they went through a lot of time going through a congregational survey. We gathered metrics for them using Mission Insight, and then some community data from the state to see where they were at, what are the possibilities. They went through a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat process in order to identify what is happening in their local church, and then did interviews with small groups based on sometimes on age, affinity, So that we had, like young adults, we had single women or married couples or all that, and address some really tough questions with them.
Yeah. When it came to that church, kind of repurposing something that they were already doing, you mentioned that to me earlier. What actually did they repurpose because of Hope?
Yeah, the common thread through all of the conversations in those small groups was the spaghetti dinner. And I was like, this keeps coming up, this spaghetti dinner. It's like, okay, let's look at the spaghetti dinner. And it was originally intended to raise money for the church, at first for their bell tower to refurbish that, and then also to help their church budget.
Right.
But they were finding that's important to them, that spaghetti dinner. And so I was like, okay, well, let's think about the spaghetti dinner. What if we repurposed it?
Right.
And use that as a tool in developing a discipleship process.
Right.
So if they can see the spaghetti dinner as creating that sense of hospitality, more of creating a sense of belonging inside and outside the church wall, because you've got a number of people in the community coming in and out of there, reaching new people for Jesus Christ, and then on into the how are you offering opportunities for people to make a commitment to Christ through that relationships that are built through the spaghetti dinner, and so, and on forth, and offering then deeper opportunities for them to develop their faith through the P of purpose, and then once again you've got disciples that are going to go out and make other disciples through engagement. Right.
I know sometimes the inertia to taking on new ministry or new ideas is, how can I do even more than the church is already doing? But with this process, you're not necessarily adding to the workload, you're repurposing what the church is already doing, so it has effect in terms of a discipleship process.
Yeah, it's addressing the why of what you do. Because if you understand, well, okay, we're having this spaghetti dinner because we're making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. If you think about everything you do through the lens, whether it's the spaghetti dinner, or it's the finance committee, whether it's the SBRC, or the Council on Ministries, whatever you're doing, what are you doing through that to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world? So doing that with a spaghetti dinner gave permission to, like, okay, in a sense, wow, this is something that we're already doing, like you said, and we can build upon this.
Get that much more fruit from that. That's wonderful. Yeah, and you also mentioned that even though Hope, at least the way it's laid out here so well, is kind of a new thing. That's only been around for maybe 2 years. But there are churches that have been basically using the process, though not using this rubric for it, that have had great success. Help me, what are some of those churches that you've seen with the discipleship process that have made their ministries and discipleship very fruitful?
Well, one is from your own jurisdiction. That'd be Church of the Resurrection in in Leawood, Kansas. Reverend Adam Hamilton. From the start of that church, was very strong on discipleship, and so anytime a person is new to the church, they've reached somebody new, they plug them right into a small group, and they have a process that's called Journey 101, and it's knowing God, loving God, serving God. So you can see here again, they have 3, but they're encompassed, in those 4 that we have.
That's the O.P.E, right?
Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Church of the Resurrection. You can get much greater endorsement than that. That's
and they
fantastic.
continue to be able to sustain their growth because they're strong on discipleship.
Right.
Whereas we have a lot of mega churches, and they might have their heyday for a while, and then if they're not paying attention to any discipleship system in their local church, and it's more about
the crowd,
then it's not going to be sustainable.
Well, let me ask you, is there something that, for the practitioners of this, let's say I'm a pastor and I'm wanting to integrate the approach of Hope in my church, what would you point to for me as a practitioner that would really make this most effective? Are there keys, a focus, or let's be certain we don't miss this in order to make this really effective? What would that be?
Yeah, as I think about our churches today, we do the H part and the E part, the hospitality and the engagement part really well, but we miss a lot in the middle too. So I think if this brochure on Hope helps outline that process of discipleship like it is in the Book of Discipline, but and each component, it describes what it is,
Yes.
And then what discipleship path looks like for an individual or for a congregation. Some examples of resources and ways to engage. There are, of course, a lot more, but these are just some examples to cite.
Right. So in each one of these 4 categories, you have actual ministries or supportive programs that would really engage the laity in making this process a reality. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to be truthful, the way that the church moved forward during Pentecost was through the work of the laity. And in the Wesleyan movement, it was the work of the laity. That,
fantastic.
In partnership with the clergy, but without the laity, it never would have happened.
Right, right. And that's so much our hope as pastors, I think, for the ministry to really be owned by the whole church, the whole people of God, and not just us as clergy. What a great way to partner for evangelism and discipleship throughout the whole church.
And also, I would just talk about, for a pastor in helping to build that is to maybe do, it's really a SWOT analysis. Look at the strengths that you already have in a local church in this area. What are the weaknesses? What are some possibilities for the future or opportunities that I might connect with? But to be intentional about it. Okay, what are we doing in this cycle of discipleship, this process, and what gifts do we have that we can build upon to overcome some of these weaknesses that we have, so that we can look on into the future about how we're going to do this really well.
Right.
With excellence.
Right. So it's a lens to analyze, I hear you saying, and once you've identified gaps, strengths and weaknesses, you can fill in those places, and you have actual tools suggested to pull that off. It's not just a diagnosis without something to help.
Right.
That's fantastic. Tell me, where would we find, if someone wants to know more and to find out more about Hope and the instruments that they can use to implement it in their church, where would they go to find that?
Okay, I would first suggest if you go to our website at Discipleship Ministries, you'll be able to locate this brochure, and that's at www.umcdiscipleship.org. And then also we have a book that will really help a congregation walk through identifying what a disciple is and how do we develop a discipleship process in our church. And that's Charting a Course for Discipleship. And that's available through the Upper Room bookstore. It's actually an online bookstore, and it's easy to order off there. But it's an excellent resource.
Good, fantastic. Now, is Charting a Course of Discipleship directly tied to Hope?
It aligns very well.
Aligns very well.
Yes,
okay.
And it also has addresses the Wesleyan roots, with prevenient grace, justifying grace, and sanctifying grace. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Jodi, thank you so much for sharing these resources and this possibility for really redesigning and enriching all the stuff that we do in evangelism and discipleship. Great tool. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.